How's the Sparky Series recap here at the Devil Deck, just above the right field line. That's Aiden Blank. I'm Kobe Bronstein. And Aiden, the Sun Devils were able to come away with one. They lost the first two games, but they were able to get back into the win column.
Yeah, I thought this would have been a very different conversation, first of all, if they had not won today. If they got swept, that would have been brutal, especially leading 8-2 going into the late innings. That was kind of the theme all weekend, is not being able to close out games. They very easily, had they allowed less runs in the late innings, could have swept this series. And that's kind of the negative to it. However, we should give them credit. I think Minnesota was a very good ball club, still is. I think Minnesota's probably going to a regional. Minnesota is a much better ball club than I think a lot of people gave them credit for. And because of that, I think a lot of people were surprised. This wasn't a weekend, beginning of the season that anybody had circled as, really one you're going to have to grind out, and yet that's exactly what it did. And Willie credited Minnesota after every single game this weekend. He credited them today because they came in and played. They knew they had a chip on their shoulder. They knew they weren't favored to win this series. They knew that most of the predictors were not taking them, and yet they came in and took 2 out of 3 and almost won again today. So good weekend for them. It was not the weekend you wanted if you're Arizona State. I'm not going to sit here and pretend it was. I don't think anybody down there would. But you played a very good game today. And outside of a couple of long balls at the end of the game, you were pretty darn good. And you're going to need that because UNLV coming up is another very good program. And then you have your last non-con of the weekend. So overall thoughts, the closing games, number one, the closing games has to get better. There's really no other way around it. You can't win like that. You just can't, especially when you play Big 12 teams that theoretically are going to be even better than this and be even better in the late innings than that. Number two, you saw a very good weekend from Isaiah Jackson.
Yep.
He maybe was the player of the weekend, depending on who you ask. Either probably him or Matt King. And number three, Willie is still kind of rearranging here. It's almost like musical chairs with the depth of this lineup, in that we saw a number of infielders again. Today, Beckett Zavorak had a great day. Even in the outfield for the first time this year, we saw a person not named Vu, Jackson, or Compton start in Jonathan Hernandez, who I was really looking forward to seeing, and Willie really appreciated him getting in there. We saw on Friday a different catcher. We saw a new catcher today, or a new catcher for Saturday, Sunday, in Josiah Cromwick. Seems like he's starting to get more reps at the catching, despite those first couple weekends of rotating. So the positions in this lineup are still very up for grabs, and they may be for a while here. And that somebody, unless you're really on a hot streak, you're going to get moved in and out of the lineup. And that's probably the second takeaway that I had. I don't know that I had a third.
I think that's enough for now, yeah.
I think so.
We'll touch on one of the things you mentioned about the outfield. There was no Kian Vu to start the game. He came in defensively, and then he had one at-bat where he flew out, and Willie said it was just more in terms of, hey, let Kian get more of a mental reset, and instead it was still Isaiah Jackson in center field, and then in left field, as always, was Brandon Compton. 2 more hits today and a pair of RBIs as well. I want to go into Friday's game first. That was a game seemingly that ASU had firmly in their control, and they lost it in the 9th inning once again. It was the second blown save of the year, and they fell in extras. What did you notice from that performance? And one of 2 games in particular where in the late innings they're just not able to close down these games.
I said it already. It's just you can't win games that way. You're not going to be able to win games giving up these late runs, and you almost did it again today. You were very close, and had they not had Derek Schaefer come out of the bullpen and deliver another quality outing, we may be sitting here talking about a sweep. So that has to get fixed. Will it get fixed? Only time will tell. There really has not been it's one person. It's kind of been just anybody you put in there has gotten hit up. It's not like they're putting in the same guys every time and losing it. And that's probably the most frustrating part, is it's really not one specific issue that you can pinpoint. And we should note, is not entirely on the defense here. It's not on the pitchers because the offense has failed to produce a lot, and at points this weekend refused to get the hits when necessary, and that dates back to last Friday when they played Oral Roberts, and the game was lost because they couldn't hit with runners in scoring position, and that got even worse this weekend. So I'm not going to sit here and say the pitching staff did everything they should have done today, better, but Friday and Saturday certainly wasn't pretty. However, the offense shares at least an equal amount of that blame for failing to produce with runners on base. And situational hitting has got to continue to be an emphasis at practice.
You mentioned situational hitting, a situation where Isaiah Jackson came up huge, was getting a double, and he hit it the other way. He was down 2 strikes in the count. And Isaiah Jackson's a guy that's now hitting .312 in the season so far. Normally, he's more of a power or strikeout guy. What have you seen from him that he's been able to make some adjustments and then be more effective and get more on base as a contact bat?
Well, the biggest thing that I've seen this year is he was a big pop-out hitter. Yeah. It just was how he was in his first 2 years here. A lot of those pop-ups ended up going over the fence. We'll give him credit for that. But the emphasis this year from hearing about him is he wants to, it's almost like an imaginary fence out here. He's imagining there's a fence, and he doesn't want to hit it over the fence or under. He wants to hit it through the fence, through the middle of that fence. And that basically is a fancy way of saying line drive. And we've seen that. A lot of his hits are low to the ground. They're hard. He hits the ball hard enough that that's a problem to field, even if it's a ground ball. They're low to the ground. They're line drives. Some of them get elevated. Really, for the most part, it's just line drive hitting. And I think a lot of that credit goes to Ellison, who has done a really good job coming in his first year with totally remaking Isaiah's swing, where he really struggled with a wood bat over the summer. It was not, I know from having seen him, it was not a fun thing to go through for him. And even with the metal bats here in the spring, he would go into slumps, and it was not a fun thing for him. He's a guy that, it would really be mentally taxing. He's got a smile on his face now, and he's not letting things affect him as much. And he's hitting more line drives, and he's become one of the most consistent hitters in this lineup. And the question now is, can he continue to be consistent? Because, again, consistency has been his main problem, at least from my eyes. He would have good weekends in the past, and he'd be, right in contention for Player of the Week, and we'd all start thinking, that's the guy. And then he'd come in the next week, and he'd struggle. So if he can continue this, hitting it at a 300 clip, his defense, I said it in the presser, even going from metal to wood, which is going to be a little bit of a, it's always an adjustment. He got drafted out of high school. He should be drafted probably a top 5 round pick, if I had to guess. If he can continue to be a 300 hitter and play outfield the way he does. And I know, hearing from some of the scouts that have been out here to see him, they completely agree. If he's hitting like this the rest of the way and can continue to play outfield the way he is, he's going to hear his name called very early coming up.
Yeah, he has all the intangibles as an outfielder, perhaps amongst the best in the country in terms of pure athleticism. And you pair that with a contact bat, more of a contact bat, because we know that he has the power. This is a very dangerous hitter. And I want to talk about a guy where you mentioned smiles from Isaiah Jackson, and there's smiles definitely from everybody that was at today's game watching Beckett Zavorak, a freshman, a guy from the state of Arizona. What did you see from him that he was able to really shine offensively?
Yeah, I thought the best 2 players today, or performances today, were Derek Schaefer and Beckett Zavorak, guys born in the state of Arizona. And we've seen this with other programs. Specifically, Kenny Dillingham was here. We've seen this in the football program. State of Arizona has a lot of athletes, very good athletes, and baseball is certainly one of its top producers. So being able to keep these guys, it's already starting to pay off. Even Isaiah Jackson, I completely forgot Isaiah Jackson from Vale down the road, Brandon Compton. A lot of these guys are local guys. They're really good. In Beckett's case, he committed here out of high school. In Derek's case, he came in, had looked at ASU. Willie had talked about he had looked at ASU, wasn't quite ready to commit, decided to go to Tennessee. I don't know that anyone would blame him in that situation. They won a national championship. Willie had said he wanted to leave. They knew he wanted to leave, and he wanted to come back. and he's made a big impact. To answer your question about Beckett, it's almost too early to tell because he hits so well, and he's going to be close to a 500 clip probably if he continues to hit at this pace by the end of the week. There's really not much way to tell. It was his third start of the season, so there's not a ton to go off of. But yes, he's been playing very well. He's been hitting the baseball. He's been getting on base. And maybe some of that is due to the competition in the middle infield. It is the most competitive of all the positions. Maybe only second. If it's second, it's only second to the catching position. But I still think the talent that's in that middle infield, it is the most competitive position on this field, shortstop and second base. So he's really had to work for it. If he doesn't produce, he's not going to play. Not because, you wanted to sit him out or you're angry at him or anything, but because you have at least 3 or 4 other guys behind him that are going to be able to produce and are really, really good. So maybe it's the competitive juices that are flowing. I know Willie's talked about that a lot, but whatever it is, he's played incredibly well, and now the question is, can he start consistently? We kind of got a heads up. Willie had talked last night about maybe getting him in and that he was a guy that he really liked. Is he going to be able to get in 2 or 3 times a weekend and continue this production is the next step, because we've seen him only 3 times so far. Obviously, the way that things shape up roster-wise next year, where you expect a couple of those middle infielders to move on, even, the corner infield positions could be open, it's going to be, a big step up for him. If he's starting sparsely, it's going to be a big step up for him if he's, needs to be the everyday starter in the middle infield, which he very could well be. So would like to see him get in a couple more times next weekend. It would be good to see if he can produce like he did today a couple more times.
Yeah, the corner infielders and New Contradas at third base, and at first base and Jacob Tobias, those positions are totally locked down. Another guy we didn't even talk about was Jax Ryan. He's a guy that can easily get into the lineup as well.
And he did. He got in a couple of times this weekend. He's gotten in some spot situations. Beckett has only started. Jax has come in off the bench. And Jax has earned that. He was playing very, very well last year. I thought he was going to continue to be a mainstay in the lineup before he got injured, 17 games in, and that was really disappointing, but it's been good to see him come back.
Arizona State 8-4 on the young season in 2025. They work next to their midweek game against UNLV here on Tuesday. Certainly going to be a good one, and we'll have more recaps with you after the games this week, where they play Gonzaga also in a 3-game set later on. We'll see you in a week's time. Arizona State 8-4. They head into a game against UNLV on Tuesday.